The Enigma in the Woods. Nathan's boots crunched over fallen leaves as he ventured deeper into the forest, his excitement growing with each step. The night sky had put on a spectacular show just hours ago, and he was determined to find the prize he'd seen plummeting to Earth. As an avid stargazer and nature enthusiast, Nathan had witnessed countless meteor showers, but this was different. The object that streaked across the midnight canvas moved with purpose, defying the typical arc of space debris. Its descent was controlled, almost graceful, and it had ignited his curiosity like nothing before. The marked trail had long since disappeared behind him, but Nathan pressed on, guided by the trusty compass hanging from his neck and the well-worn map tucked into his jacket pocket. He'd studied the area extensively before setting out, committing key landmarks to memory. A gnarly oak here, a babbling brook there, each feature of the landscape was a breadcrumb leading him closer to his goal. As the sun climbed higher, dappling the forest floor with patches of golden light, Nathan's determined stride faltered. Something was off. The air grew thick with an acrid scent, and an eerie silence had fallen over the woods. No birdsong, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. It was as if nature itself was holding its breath. Cresting a small rise, Nathan froze, his eyes widening at the scene before him. A clearing stretched out ahead, but it was unlike any natural glade he'd ever encountered. Trees lay scattered like matchsticks, their mighty trunks snapped and splintered. At the center of the destruction sat a sight that made Nathan question his own sanity. Half buried in a smoking crater was an object that defied easy description. Its sleek, metallic surface caught the sunlight, sending prismatic reflections dancing across the devastated landscape. But it was the shape that truly baffled Nathan. No rough-hewn rock from space. The object before him was clearly constructed, its form reminiscent of a massive turbine or perhaps some unknowable machine. Nathan approached cautiously, his heart pounding a staccato rhythm against his ribs. He'd expected to find a meteorite, a lump of space rock to add to his collection. Instead, he was faced with something that whispered of human ingenuity, or perhaps something beyond. The surface was smooth to the touch, almost frictionless, and pleasantly cool despite the morning warmth. Nathan traced his fingers along what appeared to be seams or panels, marveling at the precision of their fit. No screws or rivets marred the seamless design. It was as if the entire structure had been poured from a single mold of some exotic alloy. As he circled the object, Nathan's scientific mind warred with the wonder bubbling up inside him. Questions cascaded through his thoughts. What was this thing? How had it survived impact with so little damage? And most pressingly, where had it come from? The rational part of him knew he should back away, should call for help or alert the authorities. But the explorer in Nathan, the part that had driven him off the path in the first place, longed to unlock the mysteries this artifact surely held. He reached for his phone, intending to document his find, only to be met with a blank screen. No signal. Of course, he was miles from the nearest cell tower. Nathan glanced from the dead phone to the enigmatic object and back again, weighing his options. The sun had climbed higher still, and Nathan realized hours had passed since he'd first stumbled upon the clearing. He needed to make a decision. With a mixture of reluctance and resolve, he knew what he had to do. This discovery was too big, too important to keep to himself. With one last, lingering look at the impossible object gleaming in its crater, Nathan turned and began to pick his way back through the felled trees. He would find a vantage point, get a signal, and call for help. But as he hiked, his mind raced with possibilities. What if this was more than some lost satellite or a forgotten piece of space junk? What if, in his wanderings, Nathan had stumbled upon something truly extraordinary? The thought both thrilled and terrified him. Little did Nathan know, as he pushed through the underbrush in search of higher ground, that his discovery was about to set in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about the world and humanity's place in the cosmos. Nathan's legs burned as he ascended the steep incline, his earlier excitement now tempered with a growing sense of urgency. The hill he'd spotted from the clearing promised the elevation he needed to get a signal on his phone. As he climbed, his mind raced, replaying the surreal scene he'd left behind. The fallen trees, the crater, and that impossible object, it all seemed like a fevered dream now. Reaching the summit, Nathan fumbled for his phone, his breath coming in ragged gasps. 1 bar, then 2. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. With trembling fingers, he dialed emergency services, struggling to keep his voice steady as he relayed his location and the bare bones of what he discovered. "Sir, please remain calm and stay where you are." The dispatcher's voice crackled through the weak connection. "We're sending a team to your location. Do not approach the object again. Do you understand?" Nathan nodded, then realized the gesture was pointless over the phone. "Yes, I understand. I'll wait here." The wait felt interminable. Nathan paced the hilltop, alternating between staring at his phone and scanning the horizon for signs of approaching help. When he finally heard the distant thrum of engines, relief washed over him like a cool breeze. A caravan of vehicles appeared on the forest road, several park ranger trucks, followed by 2 police cruisers and an unmarked black SUV. Nathan waved his arms, guiding them to the base of the hill. As the first responders approached, he could see the mix of concern and skepticism on their faces. Officer Dalton, a stern-faced man with salt and pepper hair, took charge of the scene. His deep-set eyes locked onto Nathan, sizing him up. "You're the one who called this in?" he asked, his tone a blend of authority and genuine curiosity. Nathan nodded, launching into his account of the morning's events. As he spoke, he could see the doubt in Dalton's eyes slowly give way to intrigue. The officer's questions were pointed, professional, but there was an undercurrent of excitement that even his years of experience couldn't fully mask. "Show us," Dalton said finally, gesturing for Nathan to lead the way. The group made their way through the forest, with Nathan retracing his steps. The destruction became evident long before they reached the clearing, and Nathan heard sharp intakes of breath from the team behind him as the full extent of the damage came into view. And there it was, the object, still half buried in its crater, its metallic surface throwing off kaleidoscopic reflections in the midday sun. Nathan watched as the expressions of the rescue team morphed from disbelief to awe, and finally, to a guarded wariness. Officer Dalton sprang into action, ordering his team to establish a perimeter around the site. The park rangers began stringing up yellow caution tape, while other officers started documenting the scene with cameras and notepads. As the flurry of activity swirled around him, Nathan found himself pulled aside by Dalton for a more in-depth interview. The officer's questions were methodical, probing not just the events of the morning but Nathan's background, his reason for being in the forest, and his initial thoughts on what the object might be. "I know how this sounds," Nathan said, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "But I swear, everything I've told you is the truth. I'm as baffled by this as you are." Dalton nodded, his pen scratching across his notepad. "We've seen our share of strange things out here, son, but this is something else entirely." Their conversation was abruptly cut short by a commotion near the object. One of the younger officers had ventured closer than the others, his curiosity overriding caution. As Nathan and Dalton watched in horror, a blinding flash erupted from the surface of the mysterious artifact. The sound hit them a split second later, a concussive boom that sent birds scattering from the treetops. The young officer was thrown backward, landing in a crumpled heap at the edge of the clearing. "Medic!" Dalton bellowed, already sprinting toward the fallen man. Nathan was right on his heels, his medical training kicking in on instinct. They reached the officer just as the on-site paramedic arrived. The man was conscious but dazed, a nasty burn visible on his outstretched arm. As Nathan helped the medic assess the injury, he leaned in close, trying to make out what the officer was mumbling. "Symbols," the injured man whispered, his eyes wide with a mix of pain and wonder. "I saw symbols, like nothing I've ever seen before. Alien." Nathan's blood ran cold at the word. He glanced back at the object, which now seemed to pulse with an inner light. What had they stumbled upon here, in this quiet forest? And more importantly, what were they going to do about it? As if in answer to his unspoken question, the sound of approaching helicopters filled the air. Reinforcements were coming, and with them, Nathan suspected, a whole new level of scrutiny and secrecy. Officer Dalton pulled Nathan aside, his face grim. "I'm going to need you to stick around, son. Something tells me this is just the beginning of a very long day." Nathan nodded, his eyes drawn once more to the enigmatic object in the crater. He had a feeling Dalton was right. This was only the beginning. And as the helicopters drew closer, their rotors chopping through the air, Nathan couldn't shake the sense that his life, and perhaps the lives of everyone on Earth, was about to change forever. The clearing, once a serene pocket of wilderness, now buzzed with activity. The whir of helicopter blades faded as a sleek black chopper touched down at the forest's edge, disgorging a team of individuals whose very presence seemed to electrify the air. Nathan watched from the sidelines, still reeling from the day's events, as the newcomers strode purposefully toward the crater. At the forefront was a woman whose piercing gaze swept the scene with laser-like focus. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to command. Flanking her were several individuals in white hazmat suits, their faces obscured behind tinted visors. Officer Dalton stepped forward to meet the group, his earlier bravado somewhat diminished in the face of this clearly high-level intervention. "Ma'am," he began, "I'm Officer Dalton, first responder on the scene. We've secured the perimeter and—" The woman cut him off with a curt nod. "Dr. Elena Volkov," she introduced herself, her accent a cultured blend of Russian and American. "My team will take it from here, officer. I'll need a full briefing, but first, show me the object." As Dalton led Dr. Volkov and her team to the crater, Nathan couldn't help but edge closer, straining to catch snippets of their conversation. The scientist's eyes widened almost imperceptibly as she took in the metallic anomaly, her composure cracking for just a moment before she regained control. "Fascinating," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "Jenkins, start scanning for radiation. Kowalski, I want spectral analysis. And someone get me a closer look at those markings." Nathan's ears perked up at the mention of markings. He recalled the injured officer's delirious whispers about alien symbols. Had the team discovered something new? As if reading his thoughts, one of the hazmat-suited figures approached the object with a high-tech camera, capturing detailed images of its surface. The pictures, relayed to a mobile command center that had been hastily erected at the clearing's edge, revealed a series of intricate patterns etched into the metal, patterns that seemed to shimmer and shift under close inspection. Dr. Volkov huddled with a bespectacled man who had been poring over the images. Their hushed conversation grew heated, with animated gestures toward the screens. Finally, the man threw up his hands in apparent frustration and stormed off toward the object itself. Nathan, his curiosity overriding his sense of caution, inched closer to catch the tail end of their debate. "Impossible, Elena," the man was saying, his voice tight with emotion. "These aren't alien glyphs. They're Cyrillic." A ripple of shock passed through those close enough to hear. Cyrillic? As in Russian? Nathan's mind reeled at the implications. This wasn't some extraterrestrial visitor, but a relic of human origin? Dr. Volkov's voice cut through the murmurs. "Dr. Petrov is correct," she announced, addressing the assembled team. "What we're dealing with here appears to be a Cold War-era satellite. Soviet in origin, if I'm not mistaken." The revelation sent a wave of mixed reactions through the crowd. Some seemed relieved that the object wasn't alien in nature, while others appeared even more perturbed by the idea of a decades-old Soviet satellite suddenly appearing in an American forest. Officer Dalton, his face a mask of confusion, voiced the question on everyone's mind. But how? How could something like this go undetected for so long? And what caused it to come down now? Dr. Volkov's expression was grim. "That, Officer Dalton, is what we're here to find out. This is no ordinary satellite. Its design, its composition, they're unlike anything in our records. And its sudden appearance." She trailed off, her eyes distant. As the team of scientists swarmed the object, taking readings and samples, Nathan found himself drawn into a heated debate between two of the experts. One, a wiry man with wild Einstein-like hair, gesticulated wildly as he spoke. It must have been part of a secret program, he insisted. Perhaps a prototype for a new kind of spy satellite, one designed to evade detection. His colleague, a younger woman with close-cropped hair and intense eyes, shook her head vehemently. That doesn't explain the decay patterns we're seeing or the energy signatures. This thing hasn't just been sitting in low Earth orbit for decades. It's been somewhere else. Their argument was cut short by a shout from the crater. One of the technicians had managed to locate what appeared to be a hatch or access panel on the satellite surface. As the team gathered around, tension thick in the air, Dr. Volkov gave the order to attempt to open it. The hatch resisted at first, decades of space exposure having fused its mechanisms. But with careful application of a cutting-edge plasma torch, it finally began to yield. As the panel slowly swung open, a hiss of escaping gas made everyone take an involuntary step back. Dr. Volkov, her face set in determined lines, was the first to peer inside. Her sharp intake of breath was audible in the sudden silence that had fallen over the clearing. "My God," she whispered, her voice a mix of awe and horror. "What have we found?" Nathan, his heart pounding, craned his neck to catch a glimpse of what had shocked the unflappable scientist. As he did, he realized that the day's surprises were far from over. Whatever lay inside that Cold War relic was about to change everything again. The forest, which had started the day shrouded in mundane mystery, now stood as silent witness to a discovery that threatened to rewrite history. And as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the clearing, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of something much larger and more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. The tension in the air was palpable as Dr. Volkov's team carefully began the process of exploring the satellite's interior. Nathan, still reeling from the day's events, found himself unconsciously holding his breath as he watched the experts work. Despite the growing chill of the evening air, sweat beaded on his forehead, a testament to the intensity of the moment. Dr. Petrov, the linguist who had earlier identified the Cyrillic markings, approached the open hatch with a specialized camera. His hands, usually steady, trembled slightly as he maneuvered the device into the dark recesses of the satellite. The assembled crowd watched in tense silence as grainy images began to appear on the nearby monitors. At first, the interior seemed disappointingly mundane. A tangle of wires, circuit boards, and what appeared to be data storage units. But as the camera probed deeper, gasps of shock rippled through the onlookers. There, nestled among the technological detritus, were unmistakable signs of biological material. "Is that fur?" someone whispered, voicing the disbelief that had struck them all silent. Dr. Volkov leaned in closer to the screen, her face a mask of concentration. "Not just fur," she murmured. "I believe we're looking at the remains of test subjects, animals sent into space during the Cold War era." The revelation sent a shudder through the group. Nathan felt his stomach lurch as the implications sank in. This wasn't just some spy satellite or forgotten piece of space junk. It was a time capsule, preserving the grim remnants of a bygone era's scientific ambitions. As the team worked to extract and analyze the biological samples, a palpable sense of unease settled over the clearing. The fading daylight cast long shadows, turning the forest around them into a brooding presence that seemed to watch their every move. Dr. Jenkins, a biochemist with a shock of white hair, approached Dr. Volkov with a puzzled expression. "Elena," he said, his voice low but intense, "something's not adding up here. The decay rate of these remains, it's all wrong." Volkov's eyebrows knitted together. "Explain." Jenkins gestured at the data scrolling across his tablet. "Based on what we know about decomposition in space, these remains should be far more degraded. It's as if time has moved differently for the satellite." A hush fell over the group as the implications of Jenkins' words sank in. Nathan, who had been discreetly edging closer to listen, felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the cooling air. Dr. Kowalski, an astrophysicist who had been quietly running calculations since their arrival, suddenly spoke up. "What if," she began, her voice hesitant but gaining strength, "what if this satellite wasn't on a typical orbit? What if it went further, much further than we initially thought. Volkov turned to her, eyes sharp. Go on. Kowalski's words tumbled out in a rush of excitement and trepidation. The energy readings we've been getting, the anomalous decay rates, they all point to something extraordinary. I think this satellite might have been on an unusually long orbit, one that took it far beyond Earth's atmosphere, perhaps even to the edge of our solar system and back. The clearing erupted into a cacophony of voices as the scientists debated the possibility. Nathan's head spun as he tried to keep up with the rapid-fire exchange of theories and counter-theories. Words like gravitational time dilation and cosmic radiation exposure flew back and forth, painting a picture of a journey more fantastic than anything he could have imagined. As the debate raged on, a young technician who had been methodically scanning the satellite's exterior suddenly called out, "Dr. Volkov, I'm picking up some strange readings here. It's like nothing I've ever seen before." Volkov hurried over, her face illuminated by the eerie glow of the scanner's display. As she studied the readout, her expression shifted from curiosity to concern, and finally to something Nathan could only describe as fear. "This can't be right," she muttered, tapping furiously at the device. But repeated scans only confirmed the initial findings. Turning to face the group, Volkov's voice was steady, but Nathan could detect an undercurrent of tension. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've made a significant discovery. The satellite's outer hull shows traces of a substance that doesn't match any known element in our periodic table. More importantly, its atomic structure suggests an origin beyond our planet." The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan felt as if the ground had dropped out from beneath his feet. Extraterrestrial material? On a Cold War-era satellite? The implications were staggering. Dr. Petrov was the first to break the silence. Are you saying this satellite encountered something out there? Something not of this Earth?" Volkov nodded grimly. "It appears so, and whatever it encountered has left its mark, quite literally, on our little piece of human history here." The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled team. Some reacted with excitement, others with fear. Nathan watched as Officer Dalton stepped away to make a hushed phone call, his face pale in the gathering dusk. As the implications of their discovery began to sink in, the atmosphere in the clearing shifted. The earlier sense of scientific curiosity was rapidly being replaced by something more urgent, more primal. Nathan could see it in the darting glances, the hushed conversations, the way people unconsciously began to distance themselves from the satellite. Dr. Jenkins approached Volkov, his earlier academic detachment replaced by visible concern. "Elena," he said, his voice low but intense, "we need to consider the possibility of contamination. If this substance is truly extraterrestrial in origin, we have no way of knowing its effects on terrestrial biology." Volkov's eyes widened as the full weight of Jenkins' words hit her. In that moment, Nathan saw the confident scientist replaced by someone grappling with a threat beyond her experience. "You're right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Then, more forcefully, everyone stepped back from the satellite. "We need to establish a quarantine zone immediately. No one goes near that thing without full hazmat protection, understood?" As the team scrambled to comply with Volkov's orders, Nathan felt a creeping sense of dread. What had started as an exciting discovery in the woods had morphed into something far more ominous. He watched as Dalton coordinated with his officers to widen the perimeter, their earlier skepticism replaced by grim determination. The forest, which had seemed so familiar and inviting that morning, now loomed dark and forbidding around them. And at its heart lay a relic from the past that threatened to rewrite humanity's understanding of its place in the universe, and potentially endanger its very existence. As floodlights flickered to life, pushing back the encroaching darkness, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of something monumental. The quiet woods of his hometown had become ground zero for a discovery that could change everything. And as he watched the frantic activity around him, he wondered, was this the dawn of a new era of scientific understanding, or the beginning of something far more sinister? The night stretched ahead, promising revelations and dangers yet unknown. And at the center of it all sat the satellite, silent and inscrutable, guarding its cosmic secrets. The floodlights cast harsh shadows across the clearing, turning familiar forest terrain into an alien landscape. The air hummed with the sound of generators and the low murmur of tense conversations. Nathan, exhausted but unable to tear himself away from the unfolding drama, watched as Dr. Volkov's team donned full hazmat suits, preparing to delve deeper into the satellite's mysteries. Dr. Jenkins, now barely recognizable behind his protective visor, approached the satellite with a suite of sophisticated analytical tools. His movements were slow, deliberate, each step measured as if the ground itself might suddenly give way. The assembled crowd held its collective breath as Jenkins began his analysis of the strange substance coating parts of the satellite's hull. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Nathan found himself unconsciously edging closer, drawn by an insatiable curiosity that overrode his growing sense of unease. Officer Dalton, noticing his movement, placed a firm hand on Nathan's shoulder. "Stay back, son," Dalton warned, his voice low and tense. "We don't know what we're dealing with here." Before Nathan could respond, a commotion erupted near the satellite. Dr. Jenkins had stumbled backwards, nearly falling in his haste to distance himself from the object of his study. His voice, muffled by the hazmat suit, carried a note of panic that sent chills down Nathan's spine. "Shut it down," Jenkins shouted, gesticulating wildly. "Quarantine the entire area. Now." Dr. Volkov rushed to Jenkins' side, her own protective suit crinkling with each movement. "What is it? What did you find?" Jenkins' response was lost in the sudden flurry of activity, but the effect of his words was immediate and dramatic. The clearing erupted into controlled chaos as team members rushed to establish a wider perimeter, their earlier caution evolving into barely contained panic. Nathan found himself ushered back along with the other non-essential personnel, the police line expanding rapidly. From his new vantage point, he strained to catch glimpses of the ongoing drama. Dr. Volkov was engaged in an intense discussion with Jenkins and several other senior scientists, their body language conveying a sense of urgency that belied their attempts at calm professionalism. After what seemed like an eternity, Volkov approached the police line. Even through the hazmat suit, Nathan could see the grave expression on her face. "Officer Dalton," she began, her voice steady but underlined with tension, "we need to expand the quarantine zone. Immediately. And I need to speak with your superiors about implementing a media blackout." Dalton's eyebrows shot up. "A media blackout? Dr. Volkov, what exactly are we dealing with here?" Volkov glanced around, ensuring no unauthorized personnel were within earshot. "The substance we've discovered, it's not just extraterrestrial. It's toxic. Highly toxic. And it appears to be active." A ripple of shock passed through those close enough to hear. Nathan felt his heart rate spike, his earlier excitement curdling into fear. "Active," Dalton pressed. "What do you mean, active?" Volkov's next words sent a chill through the gathered crowd. "It's reacting to our presence. Changing. Evolving. We don't fully understand the mechanism yet, but we believe exposure could be catastrophic." The implications hung heavy in the air. This was no longer just a scientific curiosity or a relic of Cold War espionage. It was a potential global threat, sitting in their quiet forest clearing like a ticking time bomb. As Dalton hurried off to make calls and expand the security perimeter, Nathan found himself drawn into a hushed conversation between two junior scientists. "I've never seen anything like it," one was saying, her voice a mix of awe and terror. "The molecular structure is unlike anything in our databases. It's as if it's been designed to interact with organic matter." Her colleague nodded grimly. "Did you see the simulation results? If this stuff got into the ecosystem..." He trailed off, shaking his head. Nathan's mind reeled as he tried to process the implications. A toxic, potentially intelligent substance from beyond Earth, capable of altering organic matter? The scenario was straight out of a science fiction nightmare. As the night wore on, more vehicles arrived at the site. Men and women in dark suits and sunglasses, despite the late hour, began to circulate, their very presence adding another layer of tension to the already charged atmosphere. Nathan overheard snippets of conversations that made his blood run cold. Words like national security threat and potential bioweapon floated on the night air, each phrase adding to the growing sense of dread that had settled over the clearing. Dr. Volkov, emerging from a heated discussion with several of the new arrivals, approached Nathan. Her face, visible through the suit's visor, was etched with lines of exhaustion and worry. "Mr. Chin," she began, her tone formal but not unkind, "I understand you were the one who initially discovered the satellite." Nathan nodded, suddenly acutely aware of his role in the unfolding crisis. "Yes, that's right. I was just out hiking, looking for a meteor I'd seen." Volkov held up a hand, cutting him off gently. "I need you to understand the gravity of the situation. What we've discovered here, it has implications beyond anything we could have imagined. The potential for harm if knowledge of this gets out prematurely." She trailed off, her eyes conveying the weight of unspoken concerns. Nathan swallowed hard, reading between the lines. "You need me to keep quiet about all this, don't you?" Volkov nodded, a flicker of relief passing across her features.
"For now, yes."
"I know it's a lot to ask, but the safety of countless people may depend on our discretion." As if to underscore her point, a commotion arose from the direction of the satellite. One of the scientists examining the object had collapsed, his hazmat suit apparently breached. The speed with which the other team members reacted, whisking the fallen researcher away to a hastily erected decontamination tent, spoke volumes about the danger they were facing. Nathan watched the scene unfold with a growing sense of unreality. Just this morning, he had been an ordinary guy out for a hike in the woods. Now, he stood at the center of what might be the most significant and terrifying discovery in human history. As the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, casting an ethereal glow over the surreal scene in the clearing, Nathan couldn't shake the feeling that the world had fundamentally changed. The forest around them, once a place of peace and natural beauty, now seemed to loom menacingly, as if conscious of the cosmic intruder in its midst. Officer Dalton approached, his face grave. "We're moving out," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "Everyone's being relocated to a secure facility for debriefing and observation." The word hung in the air, its implications clear. They were all potential carriers now, possible vectors for a threat they barely understood. As Nathan allowed himself to be led towards one of the waiting vehicles, he cast one last glance at the satellite. In the growing light of dawn, it seemed to pulse with an inner energy, a malevolent presence that had traveled unimaginable distances to reach this quiet corner of Earth. The door of the vehicle closed behind him with a soft thud, sealing Nathan off from the world he had known. As they pulled away from the clearing, leaving behind the satellite and its dangerous secrets, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much larger, much more terrifying story. The quiet forest road stretched ahead, leading them towards an uncertain future. And somewhere behind them, nestled in its crater, the satellite waited. A cosmic Pandora's box, its lid now irrevocably opened. The days following the discovery in the forest passed in a blur for Nathan. The secure facility, a sprawling complex of sterile white corridors and windowless rooms, became his new reality. Time seemed to lose all meaning as he underwent countless medical tests, debriefings, and interviews with stern-faced officials whose affiliations remained a mystery. Through it all, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on Nathan's mind. The scientists' hushed conversations, the constant presence of armed guards, and the palpable tension that permeated every interaction served as constant reminders of the potential threat they had uncovered. It was on the 5th day of his confinement that Dr. Volkov visited him. Her face, etched with new lines of worry and exhaustion, told Nathan more than her words ever could. "Mr. Chen," she began, her voice carrying a weariness that seemed bone-deep, "I want to thank you for your cooperation during this difficult time." "Mr. Chen," she began, her voice carrying a weariness that seemed bone-deep, "I want to thank you for your cooperation during this difficult time." Nathan nodded, 1,000 questions on the tip of his tongue. But before he could voice any of them, Volkov continued, "I'm here to inform you that you'll be released tomorrow." Our tests have shown no signs of contamination, and we believe the risk to public safety is minimal as long as certain precautions are taken. The relief Nathan felt at the news of his impending freedom was quickly tempered by the ominous undertone of Volkov's words. "Precautions?" he asked, his voice hoarse from disuse. Volkov's eyes met his, and in them, Nathan saw a mix of determination and something that looked unsettlingly like fear. "What happened in that forest, Mr. Chen, what you discovered, it can never become public knowledge. The consequences would be unimaginable." As if sensing Nathan's objections, she held up a hand. "I know it sounds drastic, but you have to understand. The substance we found, its potential for both miraculous breakthroughs and catastrophic harm, it's beyond anything we've ever encountered. In the wrong hands, it could spell doom for our entire species." Nathan sat in stunned silence as Volkov outlined the terms of his release. A non-disclosure agreement that would make all others pale in comparison. A cover story to explain his absence. And a warning, veiled but unmistakable, about the consequences of breaking his silence. As Volkov spoke, Nathan's mind wandered back to that fateful day in the forest. The excitement of discovery, the wonder of the unknown, it all seemed so naive now, in light of what had followed. The next morning, as Nathan stepped out of the facility into the bright sunlight, he felt like a man emerging from a long, dark tunnel. The world around him seemed at once familiar and utterly foreign. Cars honked in the distance, people walked by engrossed in their phones, all blissfully unaware of the cosmic secret that had been uncovered in their midst. Checking into a nearby hotel, his home still off-limits pending a final sweep for contamination, Nathan found himself drawn to the television. As he flipped through the channels, a familiar scene caught his eye. His breath caught in his throat as he recognized the forest clearing, now swarming with what the reporter described as environmental specialists. Officials cite an industrial chemical spill as the reason for the continued quarantine of the area. The newscaster was saying, her voice carrying just a hint of skepticism. However, eyewitness reports of unusual activity and the continued presence of military personnel have fueled speculation about the true nature of the incident. Nathan watched, a surreal feeling washing over him, as various talking heads debated the situation. Conspiracy theories flew thick and fast, everything from secret government weapons tests to alien invasion scenarios. If only they knew how close that last one came to the truth, Nathan thought with a grim smile. As night fell, Nathan found sleep elusive. His mind raced with the implications of what he had been part of. The satellite, the strange substance, the potential for both miraculous discovery and unthinkable destruction. It all swirled in his thoughts like a maelstrom. A soft buzz from his phone startled him out of his reverie. A text message from an unknown number glowed on the screen. "The truth is out there, Mr. Chen. But are we ready for it?" Nathan's heart raced as he stared at the cryptic message. Who could have sent it? Dr. Volkov? One of the mysterious officials from the facility? Or someone else entirely? Someone who knew more than they were letting on? As if in response to his unspoken questions, the phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from a blocked number. Nathan's hand trembled as he answered. "Mr. Chen," a distorted voice crackled through the speaker. "What you discovered in the forest is only the beginning. There are forces at work beyond your imagination. Forces that have been watching us, waiting. The satellite was just a test, their way of gauging our reaction." Nathan's mouth went dry. "Who is this? What do you mean, their way?" The voice continued, ignoring his questions. "You have a choice to make, Mr. Chen. You can forget what you saw, go back to your old life, and pretend none of this ever happened. Or you can seek the truth, no matter where it leads, no matter the cost." Before Nathan could respond, the line went dead. He sat in the darkened hotel room, the phone still clutched in his hand, his mind reeling from the implications of what he'd just heard. Outside his window, the city sprawled out before him, its lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Somewhere out there, life went on as usual. People laughed, loved, and dreamed, unaware of the cosmic drama unfolding in their midst. But for Nathan, there was no going back. The events in the forest had irrevocably altered his perception of reality. As he gazed out at the night sky, he found himself searching for signs of something more, something beyond the familiar constellations and twinkling stars. The truth was out there, just as the mysterious caller had said. But was humanity ready for it? Was he? As dawn broke over the city, Nathan made his decision. Whatever lay ahead, whatever truths or dangers awaited, he knew he couldn't simply walk away. The path before him was shrouded in mystery and fraught with peril, but it was a path he had to follow. With a deep breath, Nathan picked up his phone and dialed a number he thought he'd never use. As it rang, he steeled himself for what was to come. The truth was calling, and Nathan Chen was ready to answer. In the forest clearing, now empty of investigators and onlookers, the earth where the satellite had lain began to stir. Unseen by human eyes, something awakened, something that had traveled across the vast gulfs of space, biding its time. The true nature of the cosmic artifact's mission was only just beginning to unfold, its consequences rippling out across the world like unseen waves of change. The stage was set for a new chapter in human history, one that would challenge everything we thought we knew about our place in the universe. And at the center of it all stood Nathan Chen, an unwitting herald of a new cosmic age. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the awakening city, Nathan stepped out of his hotel room, ready to face whatever the future might hold. The world around him seemed unchanged, but he knew better. Everything was different now. The truth was out there, and he was going to find it,